Alright, so for better or for worse, the 2020s are among us. We have been through every finals in the 2010s, and I'll say things got things got really bad after around 2015, 2016. It just really was not an exciting time in terms of NBA finals, for the most part anyways. However, to celebrate the end, somebody had a very good idea. They said that I should do finals tiers, because I actually did go through and rank all the finals in terms of like importance, and I did that from the year 2000, I believe. I don't know, it was such a long time ago, a lot of you probably haven't seen it. But in any case, that was such a different list. That was me going just from 1 to 18. For this one, I'm actually gonna use the same rankings that a lot of other NBA YouTubers have been using. MDJ is the most recent that I've seen, and he did his for the last 25 finals, and I'm just gonna do mine, and it's gonna be my own opinion because I actually didn't watch his whole video, so hopefully we don't end up with the same exact rankings, but I'm just going to do them for the 2010s. They are the freshest in most of our minds. It celebrates the end of this decade, and I think it's going to spawn some pretty interesting conversations, and I also think a lot of you might end up disagreeing. That's the fun part about these ranking type things. Alright, so as you can see, here are the tiers, and it only really needs S through C. I went through and I did kind of a tester, and D was unnecessary. There's only 10 finals here, and from my perspective, I think a lot of these, you'll get the explanations. So starting off with S, right off the bat, we started off this decade with an amazing finals with the Celtics and Lakers. I think 2010 is definitely an S ranking because there was so much leading up to it, and it was a very competitive series as well. I realize a lot of people may not have even watched that by now, but only 2 of those games, to the best of my memory, only 2 of those games were decided by double digits. The rest of them were close, they were intense the whole way out. For a lot of the games, it seemed like they could have went either way. And that was just a really epic way for a Celtics and Lakers finals to happen, especially 2 years after Boston had just kind of thrashed them in Game 6 of the 08 finals. This was the whole thing about Kobe Bryant trying to win without Shaq. Then if they would have lost to the Celtics that year, it would have been said that they lost to them twice. And of course in the 09 finals, the Celtics didn't make it there due to injury, so while the Lakers did win a championship, I know for a lot of their fans it probably felt more like a consolation prize because they really wanted Boston. And coming into 2010, again, Boston, they got kind of older, there was injuries, so Boston really wanted them, they really wanted to dethrone the Lakers. So that series also concludes with what I think is one of the greatest Game 7s of all time. You go back and look at the score, it was 83-79, so especially today, that would be considered extremely low scoring. However, it was a really tight and defensive affair. Nerves were obviously going because Lakers were missing free throws like hell. Pretty much everybody was missing their shots. It's funny because that's remembered as Kobe Bryant having a terrible game, but really everybody was. It went down to the final minutes. Even after that Ron Artest dagger that you see, the Celtics did manage to bring it back within 3 points. There was, I think if you go to like under 2 minutes in that game, the last 2 minutes were just crazy back and forth, and even as big as a Celtics fan as I was at the time, when they ended up losing that night, I wasn't even disappointed. I felt like good fight, good game. It was a respectable way to go out. And yeah, oh my goodness, nearly 10 years later, it's definitely still one of my greatest memories. That finals, there's nothing you can take away from it. That is 100% S tier. And here's where you all might end up disagreeing, but I'm going to back my position. The only other S tier I would say from this decade, I would have to go 2011. I'm pretty sure I'm going to look back and say that's the only other S tier finals. The 2011 finals, that's where you have, first of all, anybody who tells you they expected the Mavericks to be in the finals that year, they are lying. That was the year people were talking about Celtics, Lakers, Miami Heat. Those were pretty much who they were talking about. I feel like I'm forgetting one, but it was not the Mavericks. And that finals was mostly elevated due to the expectations of the Miami Heat. Of course, this was their first finals together. LeBron James and Dwayne Wade specifically, I feel like, had a lot to live up to. They had a lot to deliver. Because with that party and talking about they've created this crazy team and they can win the next 7 championships with Pat Riley playing point guard. First of all, that season had already kind of been a struggle for them trying to figure out how to make it fit. But by the time the playoffs came around, they were able to roll through the East. And this finals really just has a lot of iconic moments. It's so iconic, I really feel like a lot of people think that Dirk's 2011 ring is worth more than a lot of players. You talk about game 2 when they were down, how much was that? They were down a good amount going into the end of that game, and it was happening like everybody expected it to. The Mavericks were a good team, but again, we were looking at the Miami Heat's trio back then, and they were fully expected to win that series. So when we got to game 2 and Dallas was getting blown out, we were like, yeah, LeBron has finally done it. They did exactly what they said they were going to do. And then there's that epic comeback capped off by Dirk Nowitzki's finger roll. That pretty much goes on to change the momentum of the series. We have that moment where Dirk Nowitzki gets sick, I guess, and Dwayne Wade and LeBron James are making fun of him in the press conference. They're coughing. And yeah, pretty much all of those games were competitive as well. The only game that was not competitive, relatively anyways, was game 1. Miami Heat pulled away near the end there. They took control of it a good way through. At least that's what I remember. But then after that, everything else kind of came down to the wire. Even game 6, Dallas didn't fully take that game by the throat until the very end. And it capped off in one of the most iconic ways possible, with Dirk Nowitzki hitting that fadeaway against Bosh. The Mavericks had figured out a way to handle the Miami Heat trio. I have a video on my main channel breaking down that series and their defense against LeBron James, so they were able to make him totally ineffective. And in the end, the underdogs come out in 6 against a team that a lot of people felt like back then was about to own the NBA for a really long time. A lot of players we had been waiting to see get rings finally get them. Jason Kidd, Dirk Nowitzki. And it was especially beautiful for Dirk because he had stayed loyal to Dallas, and they had plenty of heartbreak before that. The 06 finals, that year they won like 67 games and then went out in the first round even though they were playing the A-seeded Warriors. There was a lot going on there, so competitive series, good stories, definitely etched in my memory. But as I said, I think that is the only other S tier here. So you might be surprised. You're gonna ask me, how in the world does the 2016 finals get an A tier? How does that go below the 2010 and 2011 ones? Well, it's because I'm gonna tell you what you guys have forgotten about 2016. That was really not that competitive of a finals until you got around to the end. The Golden State Warriors blew the Cavaliers out of the fucking box in the first 2 games. Those were not entertaining. Cavaliers came back and blew them out in game 3. Then game 4 was pretty competitive, but the Golden State Warriors were able to pull away at the end. Game 5 is the absolutely amazing comeback from Kyrie Irving and LeBron James, where they have 41 points together. Of course, by that point, Draymond Green is not playing. He is suspended for that game, and that's also where Bogut gets hurt. They go back to game 6, that is another wash. Then game 7 is one of the best games in history. So by virtue of it having one of the best games in history, of course it is going to be an A tier. But the rest of that series, guys, I watched the whole thing. I know a lot of you watched it. That was not a long time ago. That was not that great of a series overall. That being said, it is the 73-9 Warriors going against LeBron, who was trying to get his first championship for Cleveland. And those moments alone, the block and the shot, those being a part of that series, especially when you talk about the 41-point games from LeBron and Kyrie in game 5, you mix that up and yeah, you still have an A series, but not an S, because when we started that series, those first 2, I was like, goodness. I really at that point was convinced that the Warriors and Thunder was the real NBA finals that year. I was convinced that it was going to be a wash, that Golden State was every bit of the 73-win team they looked like. And then after just having watched that whole season and watching the Golden State Warriors, I'm always going to feel like if there was just no injuries or suspensions whatsoever, I'm always going to feel like Golden State really could have had that series. And really, I think they would have walked away with it in 5. But that's not what happened. We're ranking it off of what happened, and yes, it's an A finals to me, but not an S. To me, an S is going to have you on the edge of your seats like 95% of the time, and that's what I'm going to say that the 2010 and 2011 had, that 2016 did not. And that just so happens to be exactly how I feel about the 2013 NBA Finals. Again, amazing moments, one of the greatest Game 7s ever, but again, that's another one where people don't remember. That was not an amazing series all the way through. San Antonio takes Game 1 in a nail-biter. Miami Heat come back and wash Game 2. Spurs wash Game 3, Heat wash Game 4. Spurs don't absolutely wash Game 5, but it's not anything that special. It's really when you get to Game 6 and 7 when it's like, man, this is special. Game 6 is still one of those, I would say, like, if you're going through and telling me name one game from the NBA's last decade that just sticks out, immediately Game 6 comes to mind, because I'll never be able to get it out of my head. I will never be able to get out of my head watching the Spurs, watching everything that had to go wrong for them to lose that finals, and then for Ray Allen to be in the perfect spot to hit the perfect shot. And in my opinion, I think that's the greatest shot in NBA history. And then in Game 7, I feel like Game 6 was so good. Tell me if you feel this way. I really feel like Game 6 almost eclipses Game 7, even though Game 7 was also very tight, very competitive. It was a nail biter. I think people forget about Tim Duncan's layup against Shane Battier that could have tied the game, I believe. And then he goes down and he slaps the floor. It really really feels like it feels like when you talk about 2013, what comes up is Game 6 and not Game 7. And that's very rare, especially for an NBA Final Series. Like, name me a 7-game Final Series where you can talk about another game more than you can talk about the Game 7. Off the top of my head, I don't have many. But again, like I said, that is not a series where I feel like I was on the edge most of the time. I felt like most of the time I was watching them kind of wash one another until we got to the end, and they were very good games. So it ended up having 3 nail biters, and hey, that's why it's an A tier. Has some of the greatest moments in finals history, absolutely. But as a finals overall, I'm giving that an A tier and not an S. If we were just ranking these off of iconic moments and iconic moments alone, yes, I would give these, it really, then you would be looking at 2016 and 2013s as S's, I believe. But if I'm talking about just overall series, I think these are A's. So that brings us to 2019, the one we just experienced a couple weeks ago. 2019 is going to go in the B tier. You know, I would say this is one of the best finals since 2015, absolutely. It's one of the only finals at the end of this decade that really had any suspense, but it also felt like that hill for the Warriors to climb, it kept getting steeper and steeper. So I'm watching this Toronto team who has had pretty incredible fortunes in terms of health and not having to have guys miss time, go up against this Warriors team. Like, by the end, they lost 2 people in 2 games. There was Kevin Durant at the very end, Klay Thompson in the final game, the final minutes of that game. And it's funny, if you watch the podcast, me and Eric were talking about the fact that for the few moments that Kevin Durant was on the floor this series, just those few moments, the Warriors looked like they were in another tier than the Raptors. But you know what, we're not here to rank hypotheticals or whatever, we're just ranking what happened. And when you talk about a game like Game 3 in this series, where we had to watch the Raptors play Steph Curry and he was out there with guys that a lot of people wouldn't be naming, really. That was the one that Klay Thompson did not play. They had to start Shaun Livingston at shooting guard. But it really feels, though, by 2019, it felt like people just wanted to watch a suspenseful series by any means necessary. Nobody cared that the Warriors did not have Kevin Durant. Nobody cared that Cousins was out of shape. Especially because the road to this finals, it seemed like Golden State was going to be healthy, and absolutely nobody thought with 5 All-Stars on the floor it would even be possible for them to lose. I still absolutely believe if they had the healthy Warriors come against the Raptors, there's no way the Warriors wouldn't have won that series. But just the product that we were watching on the floor, yeah, I think these are a step below the rest of these right here. There's not even an iconic moment, I think, in the 2019 series. Like, if you look at these other 4 finals, you have the Ray Allen shot. Of course, you have the block in the Kyrie shot. You have Ron Artest in Game 7 of 2010. Then you have the Mavericks comeback capped off by Dirk Nowitzki in Game 2. So all of those have, like, moments that just stick out that are etched. I don't really feel like the 2019 finals have that moment. So while we were all happy to see competitive basketball and teams just duking it out, and we didn't actually know who was gonna win, I definitely think this is a B tier. And right along with that, I am going 2015 for the B tier. 2015 is a B tier series to me. Despite Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love being out, we saw LeBron James playing some pretty amazing basketball. Like, the fact that the Cavaliers were leading that series 2-1 at a certain point, and Kyrie Irving again did not play past Game 1. That was incredible. I think that's when the Warriors were still trying to figure it out. And the Cavaliers, their defense was underrated that year. People like to just look at their roster and trash it, and they like to say, oh, Delly gave Curry problems, but fam, Delly was ready to die to defend Curry in 2015. There was actually a game where he had to go to the hospital afterwards. He really pushed his body to its absolute limits to try to win that NBA championship. So while it wasn't entertaining from the standpoint of having stars everywhere like Kyrie and Love, it would have been awesome to see them back then against that Warriors team, which wasn't yet like the juggernaut that we came to know. It was still a competitive series for a pretty good amount of time until the end. I think by the end, especially when the Warriors brought out the small ball lineup, they had officially figured them out, and then Curry started cooking Delly. So yeah, it really could only last so long. And again, yeah, this is another one of those finals where I don't really think there's that much of an iconic moment here, and it's really hard to have one when the Warriors were such heavy favorites after the Cavaliers went through those injuries. That's what these 2 finals have in common to me. That's what 2019 and 2015 have in common, is just when it's so heavily hindered by injuries, it's hard to have that moment, because those moments are really bred from 2 teams really trying to edge each other out, and then somebody gets to edge at like a final moment or something like that. It's hard to have that when one team is just expected to win, but it does happen. Again, 2011. I had to think Maybe I do need a D. Yeah, so I've actually added a D roll here because I am foreseeing an issue. And 2014 is gonna go in the C list. The Spurs, if we were just judging one team, if we were just judging it off of, if the judgment was lopsided, this would be much higher, but 2014 was quick, short, sweet, to the point. The Spurs were superior, their ball movement was amazing, they were on a mission, the Heat were at the end of their dynasty, and San Antonio dismantled them. The reason it gets a C is because, again, this was one where the Heat just got picked apart. You look at the rest of these series that I've ranked so far, it's not really anybody just getting picked completely apart. The Spurs, however, the only thing I remember about that only thing I remember about 2014 is the ball just swinging around, the Heat missing a grand opportunity to possibly have taken game 1 because LeBron James had cramps, and who knows how that could have changed the series because the Heat did win game 2, right? But yeah, once San Antonio got to Miami, it was on. It was like they remembered game 6 and 7, and it was very brutal. Nothing that iconic from either side here again. Kawhi Leonard's first Finals MVP, but as far as a moment, I don't think these games were really close enough to have a moment, so that's gonna get a C tier, and you'll learn why it's not gonna get a D tier soon. That brings us to 2012. 2012 is going to go in the B tier. So you might ask, how did 2014, a 5-game series, get put a tier below 2012, which was also a 5-game series? And that's because you've forgotten how good the 2012 finals actually were. The only game that I can remember that was not close in 2012 was the final game when the Thunder were down 3-1, so that was game 5. They were down 3-1 in Miami. The momentum was overwhelming. You could tell that LeBron and Wade were ready to kill the memory of the previous year, get LeBron his first championship. But aside from that, the rest of it was really competitive. I can remember pretty much all of those games going down to they went down to the wire. One of the performances that nobody even talks about was game 4. OKC lost that game, but Russell Westbrook had 43, and that's a performance, again, of course it wouldn't be talked about because they didn't win, but had the Thunder have won that game, I think they would have gone on to tie the series, and that would have been a very iconic finals performance. Other than that though, yeah, the scores, OKC pulled away at the end of game 1 and they won that one by 11, but the rest of these were decided by 6 or less until you get to game 5. And KD and LeBron, they were going at it. That was also a year that LeBron, if you watch my breakdown, he completely expanded his game. He pretty much every weakness that he had in 2011 that Dallas was able to exploit, he fixed those up for 2012, and that was a great series. But of course, by virtue of that being a 5-game series, it obviously can't be A tier. Nothing that would even come close to making it S tier. So I think B is an appropriate ranking here. Short series, but still very competitive. That allows us to go ahead and wrap this up. 2018, trash. 2017, trash. Yeah, I don't really know what else I need to say here. 2018 really felt like after game 1 with the whole J.R. Smith fiasco, hey, it did have an iconic moment, right? I guess you could put that as an iconic moment and have it in A or S. No, not really. Maybe if the Cavaliers had a won game 1, no, still not. They still wouldn't have had no chance that series. That's the only memorable thing about that. After that, I don't even think the finals games were worth watching, and that's what I don't miss about the Warriors being gone, is that literally having finals games, like you wait all year to get here, and having finals games that you don't feel like you need to watch. I'm not gonna miss that feeling. So yeah, that's 2018. That is a complete dud, but it did give us hella memes though. So, and then 2017, same thing. Warriors killed it first 2 games. Cavaliers tried to make it competitive in game 3 and KD shut all that down. Same thing actually in 2018 too. There was a competitive game 3 there, but nah, it's a sweep. Game 2017 went to 5 games, gentleman sweep, and again, there was never a question. I think there was a point where the Cavaliers looked so dominant in the Eastern Conference that I tricked myself into believing that it could be a 6-game series. But still, nah. When it was still fresh and the Warriors added Kevin Durant, when that first happened, there was never a thought that they could actually lose, and we were right. So yeah, that is my rankings for these 10 finals. From 2010 to 2019, let me know what y'all think because I expect you to disagree with the A and S rankings. I'm thinking that some of you will. Hit the like button, comment, and sub if you enjoyed, and hit the bell next to my name if you want notifications on future videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.